the things that makes me happy in my garden is that I'm able to have different styles, different vignettes. The side garden is a woodland garden because it's shady. The back garden around the pool is bright and hot, and so I have tropical plants there. The front bed is what I like to call sort of Southwest Texas cottage.
Diana Kirby's garden has changed a lot since she and husband Jeff Eller bought their house in 2003 when daughter Callie was an infant.
It was so pristine and everything was beautiful and there were no weeds. And we bought the house and I realized that was just a fresh layer of mulch, and there were in fact weeds, and so I was going to get to use my gardening skills. The backyard didn't exist at that time. There was a swimming pool, but all of the backyard was scrub and stumps and rocks. One of our challenges here is that we're at the top of a hill, and so we get a lot of wind, sometimes strong winds. And we had to consider that when we were building the beds along the pool, because I didn't want to be out there with the net trying to fish a bunch of, delicate blooms out of the pool. We also have deer outside the fence, and we have rabbits and squirrels and other little critters that come visit us. And then we have drainage issues. The water from several properties over just drains all the way close to our house. So we've had to put in a number of dry creeks, and we just cleared the scrub and started fresh. And we put in some lawn, and we created some beds, and our daughter was 6 months old, so we put in a playscape, knowing that shortly she'd be climbing in there. And it just slowly developed from there, and over time beds got bigger, a vegetable garden came along.
Although the yard's fenced against deer, Diana corralled her vegetables from the family's energetic dogs.
We got a greenhouse, which was great because I love tropical plants, and that gave me a place to put them in the winter.
Diana borders it with seasonally blooming perennials and annuals that feed pollinators. Gardens are never static, though. We grow and change along with them, and so do our children.
My husband Jeff said to me one day, we probably should take down the playscape. Our daughter's 15, she's not going to use it anymore, and we don't need it. And my first reaction was, well, why would we do that? We might sell the house to someone that has kids. And then I thought about it a little further and realized, if I take out the playscape, I have a new space in which to garden. I thought I could build a garden that left the gravel as the pathway, and then build a little rose garden, a parterre, and have a couple of roses out there where I am not able to have them outside of the fence because of the deer. And then I thought, well, I'd like a little seating in there, so I put a bench up against the fence. And then I thought how lovely it would be to look out there and see the reflection back from a mirror hanging on the fence. My original plan was to have a multi-basin fountain in the center used as a planter. But the first time I went out there and sat in the bench, I realized that would obstruct my view. So I opted instead for a bird bath that I had here and put that in the center. And now I can sit out there and look at the garden from a completely different vantage point. I wanted a new path to go out to the rose garden, but I was having trouble with the old path. It was just stepping stones with decomposed granite. It was hard to keep edged. The weeds loved the granite and they were in there all the time. It was a lot of work. So I decided to mortar in that path, leaving holes for plants, blooms, flowers, whatever I wanted to put in there. And then we added a second path. And so now I have beautiful blooms along my path still, but I don't have the back-breaking work of trying to dig weeds out of the decomposed granite. Originally along the pool beds, I was keeping things simple. And over time I decided I wanted to play some more in those beds. And so I added in some beautiful hot pink hibiscus and some Pride of Barbados and a few other things to soften it a little bit. Keeping the color, keeping the drama, but having a little bit softer feel.
Since family and friends often head out back to gather round, Diana furnished and accented for amiable comfort. She sprinkles in charm to unite indoor and outdoor living rooms on the patio nook.
The addition of the fountain that Jeff built for me was great because now that is really my favorite place to sit because I have the water running. Sometimes we have frogs that crawl in behind the rocks of the fountain and spend their summers there. And it's just a delightful space to look out and see the rest of the garden from. The cabana is a functional space for us. We can sit here and watch TV. My family comes over and we eat dinner here at the table. It gives me a place to put plants that really like shade, because most of my garden is pretty warm and hot, and this is a nice place for succulents and bromeliads and epiphyllum that like to be in a lot of light but don't really want that direct sun. I have an obsession with pots, I'll admit it. You'll find in the garden it's turquoise, it's a lime green and maybe some orange, and I try to stick to that color palette and then mix the plants in with it.
Air conditioners make Texas summers bearable, but Diana disguised the utilitarian bulk with Austin artisan Bob Poole's metal surround that doesn't impede airflow.
The gate I fell in love with at an antique shop in Johnson City. We were driving through, coming from camp with our daughter, and I found this beautiful door, but it really wasn't a door. I think it was just created to be something ornamental, and it ended up in our truck and came home with us. So the first work that I did in the woodland garden was to take care of the drainage problem. We dug a swale and put river rock in there, and we put some flagstones. And it soon became very apparent that when we had the heavy rainfall that we sometimes get, that it wasn't going to contain it enough. So we had to go back to the drawing board and add on to it. We put a French drain in. It's mostly shady, and so I call it the woodland garden. It just has a really lovely light that filters in and touches the plants just right and makes them sparkle. I did something a little different in the space in the front along the walkway to the front door. Most of my garden beds, you'll find, are hot pops of color, kind of confetti color. The path along the front of the house I wanted to be more muted and a little more monochromatic. So I've used repetition a lot with the plants and the colors, and have focused on things that are in sort of the burgundy lavender family. Then some of the shrubs are variegated because that space is shaded to add light into those beds. I've also worked really hard to put a lot of texture in there, a multi-dimensional feel in there with the layers and the textures. But out in the front, it was so flat and so hot and so dry. So we brought in a lot of rock and we built this layered bed, and then I filled it with those hot confetti pops of color that I like, with a mix of some sculptural things like the agaves and the yuccas, and then some soft things, because one of the things that I try very hard to do when I'm designing is to consider the vignette in terms of how plants look relative to one another. There are so many plants here that are pollinator friendly. The hummingbirds and the butterflies and the caterpillars and the bees, they love this garden, and I love watching them.
Through all Diana's garden changes over the years, the biggest change has been in her perceptions of what it's all about.
You have to find that balance between what works for you as a gardener and brings you joy, but then there might be something else that just feels like a chore, and I've just reached the point where I'm really working hard to find that balance so that gardening is a pleasure and it brings me peace,